Due to poor wireless connection. Is this thing on? Is this thing on? Cool. Yes, we are Facebook Live. I've never done this before. Fuck it. Yeah. So.
Should I be Instagramming?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if it'll pop up when a question comes in or anything. I don't know how that works. I'm probably just gonna not answer any questions. For those of you who don't know me, and I recognize almost everybody here, my name is Joe. I am the head coach and founder of the Summit Endurance Academy. I have been a professional endurance coach for, gosh, at this point, 12 or 13 years. I have a master's degree in exercise physiology. I've been at a pretty damn high level in, I ran Division I college track. I rode bikes in college. I've raced pro mountain bikes. I've been ranked in the top 3 to 5 in the country in sky running. I was in the top 100 in the country in Nordic skiing at one point. So I've done a lot of different things, which I think, when I combine that with years and years and years of education, I like to think I know some stuff. Do some stuff okay. What I wanted to talk about today, and I'm, as we're here to talk about tonight, a little bit of uphill skiing stuff. I'm the national team head coach for the U.S. Ski Mountaineering Association. We took the most successful U.S. team ever to Worlds in Pianco de Valle last year. So I've been, as an athlete, I've been on the podium at U.S. Nationals in Skimo. That's a little bit about me. I wanted to kind of talk a little bit tonight about, really just kind of some things that I've been kind of mulling over in my head for the last summer and kind of how they relate to the athletes that I coach and how that can relate to you guys. So right now, the Summit Endurance Academy is we do private coaching. So an athlete comes to us and says, "Hey, we have this goal. I want to do, I want to run this race in this time at this date. Can you help me?" And so, me and my coaches and my nutritionist and my exercise psychology coach or my sports psychology coach, we'll kind of sit down and we'll, work on a plan with an athlete. I do everybody from. I have a 72-year-old all the way down to a 16-year-old as athletes right now, and everything from my first 5K to I want to be competitive at the World Championships, because really for me it's all about the puzzle. I like a diverse set of puzzles. I think it keeps me challenged. I enjoy it. It keeps me interested. And part of the fun of that is coming out to events like these, and because it's kind of a whole different set of puzzles to figure out what of my knowledge can help every single one of you, and that's really what I want to talk about tonight. So as I'm talking with athletes, one of the biggest things that I've been thinking about in the last few months is how to be an athlete long term. And how to be consistent over a long period of time, because really that's when you make the biggest gains. Setting we have and I don't claim to know history, but it seems to me like we have a large and growing larger number of people who train for one event for 3 months a year. They're maybe a little bit active most of the time, but then they spend 3 months really gunning for something. And unfortunately, what happens there is, so our body has, and I like to use my little air graph. Our body has a progression line. So we want to. Our body is saying, through exercise and recovery, our body has a certain progression that it wants to follow. And what happens when we throw, especially a short-term, 3-month event, and that is short-term. What happens when we throw that event in there is that sets a different progression line than our body wants to do. So instead of, saying like, okay, well, I'm going to improve my 5K by 4 minutes in 3 months. Now, because of that goal, you have to improve it by 5 minutes in 3 months. And what that does is by making the slope of that line steeper, you're becoming unsustainable. And what happens is you might accomplish that goal, but then what happens directly after that? You say, wow, that was fucking hard, and I don't want to do that again, and the training wasn't that much fun, and the race was kind of fun, but I need to take 2 months off. So you're literally taking 3 months on, 2 months off. And that's if you're lucky. A lot of people will, like I said, they'll train for 3 months, they'll do something really hard, and then they're off for a while. So what I've really been talking with athletes a lot about is hey, let's not, like, when an athlete comes to work with me, I say, okay, well, like, I love this race, I love this goal, but let's not do it this year. Let's not do it in 3 months. Let's do it in 15 months. And what you're going to find is that through that time, you're not going to be that 5 minutes faster that you wanted to this year, but you're going to be 7 minutes faster next year. And you're going to blow anything that you ever thought you could do out of the water by focusing on that long term and by respecting the progression that your body wants and just doing that, because then that line never stops moving. If you can keep that steady progression of what your body can do for a year or 2 years or 3 years, it's bonkers what you can do. It's so much different than like, you do this or you do this. And this is, way, way higher. And because really what we're and I guess this kind of steps back a little bit, but it's really all about consistency and how do you structure consistency? And that's one of the first things that I'll always talk to a lot of athletes is, okay, well, in the past, how have you made sure that you're consistent? What are the strategies and what are the thought processes that you use to be consistent? And interestingly, one of the biggest factors in how consistent are you is how seriously do you take rest? Do you make sure that you have, like 1 day off every week? And do you make sure that you have a significant rest period once every 4 weeks? And if you take those times, you'll find that over a longer period of time, you make much bigger gains. And that's because, as one of my coaches once said a long, long time ago, and I don't even remember who it was at this point, the only time you're getting faster is when you're flat on your back. If you think about it, if you go to time yourself on, say, a mile run, and then you go do your workout, and then you go time yourself on that mile run again, are you faster or slower? You're slower, right? Because training makes you slow. Training doesn't make you fast. Training makes you slow. Resting is what makes you fast. Resting after training is what makes you fast. So the key is to train a lot, and not even a lot, but train consistently, but then make sure that you're giving yourself time to recover. And I am a really big fan of every single one of my athletes, depending on the athlete, depending on the goal, usually every 3 to 4 weeks, we'll take 1 day off, 1 day easy, 1 day off, and 1 day easy. And by off, I mean off, off, off. No physical therapy, no massage, no yoga, no nothing. Because all of those things are still stresses on the muscle. They might not be a big cardio strain. Your heart rate might not get high. But if you get a massage, how many of you have gotten a massage and been sore as hell? Right? Yeah, they tear you apart. And so that isn't your body recovering. That's your body taking just a different kind of abuse. And so it's still, they tell you after a massage, they're like, make sure you drink a lot of water. Yeah, it's because you're beat to shit. So if you make sure that those days, and especially coming back from an injury, a lot of athletes will, they'll be like, okay, well, I have this physical therapy regimen, and I'm not injured, or I'm injured currently. So that means that every day I need to be doing physical therapy as much as I can. Well, physical therapy is also abusing that muscle. I mean, it's not abusing, but it's asking the muscle to change. And anytime you ask that muscle to change, it's stressful. The same way it's like, trying to get any one of you to change a habit asking that muscle to change a habit is stressful for that muscle. So you want to, on at least 1 day a week, and every third or fourth week, probably 2 days, you want to have a couple days where you don't ask that muscle to do shit. You let it lay on the couch, and you let it drink some beer, and it just chill out. And over time, you're going to find out that what that's going to do is really just enable that consistency. So when you're in a training block and you're training every day, inevitably at some point you're going to get some kind of injury, and you're going to be limited by that injury. And that injury doesn't, whatever little muscle or tendon or ligament isn't getting stronger. It's just barely not breaking every day. So that is always the weakest link in the chain, and will always be the weakest link in the chain. If you don't take that day off, and that 3 or 4 days really easy, eventually, that one link is going to break. It's pretty much a guarantee. So taking that extra time off is really all about letting the entire system come back strong. So you take that 1 day off a week, every week, you're probably still going to end up with a weak spot at some point. But then you take that extra like 3 days every fourth week or something, and you get, it helps quite a bit. Daniel Rothman joined. Abby Hoffey joined. Sweet! People are watching! I couldn't tell if it was like questions or whatever. So yeah, as a coach of athletes, and I by no means work with all elite athletes. I'd say probably 20% of my athletes are what I would consider elite, and only 1 or 2 actually like make money on their sport. But any athlete who works with me, by virtue of cost, is motivated. And for me, the biggest thing that I can do to affect the performance of a super motivated athlete is usually once a week and once every 3 weeks, sitting on them and saying, you are not going to fucking train. Because that is every motivated athlete's biggest weakness, is training when they should be resting. Yeah, and there's a lot of structure within that, and how to get them to like rest between intervals in order to get really high.
Does rest mean like no skiing, or like no skiing like 6 to 10 grand in a day?
Right.
What do you mean by that?
So I do 1 day a week of nothing. Absolutely. And then every 3 or 4 weeks, you do 4 or 5 days of like day off, day on, a day off skiing, but not 4 to 5 grand. Day off skiing, but not 4 to 5 grand, and then back out.
No, like 6 plus.
Yeah. So I do like
what's a small day for like somebody of like your caliber? You want to go stretch your legs and go skiing? Like, is that like 3?
Yeah, it's like 1,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah, totally. Yep. So I'll do once every 4 weeks. I'll do a day off, 1,000 vert, a day off, 1,000 vert, and then I get back into my 3,000 or 4,000 foot days. And then by that weekend, so that's usually like Monday through Thursday, and then that weekend I'll probably do a 6,000 to an 8,000 foot day. But before that, I will like super unload. You know, if you're talking about hours, if somebody's training 10, 12, 14 hours a week, they'll do off 1 hour, off 1 hour. At absolute most, off 1 hour, off 2 hours, and it'll all be pretty mellow. And it, you know, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? You think like, oh, I want to get faster, so I need to do more. I need to do more. I need to do more. And actually, you often don't. It's often you need to structure the week a little differently, and then make sure that you're taking your rest. With most athletes, the biggest limiter is rest and how seriously you take rest. I wrote a blog post a couple weeks ago about aging and performance. Did you read that one, Bill? You read that one. Anybody else read that one? So I was at a coaching conference about, I guess about like a month and a half ago now. And this woman who is she coaches essentially her expertise is masters cyclists, so like 50 plus, and she was talking about how we kind of think as a culture that once we hit 35 or 40 years old, there's nothing we can do. We're just going to get slower. We can fight the decline, but we're just going to get slower. And really, that's only true if we've been training like an Olympian since we were 15. If you've been training like an Olympian since you were 15, somewhere between 35 and 40, you're going to see about a 1% decline per year in performance. And really, even that isn't that much. But if you haven't been training like an Olympian, which is pretty much all of us, right? Then you can most likely with a focused training program, you can probably see measurable increases in performance for 5, 10, or even 15 years. She cited she has one athlete who he was not an elite master cyclist, but he was very competitive. Like he was not recreational by any means. He was definitely a racer. And he started training with this coach at the age of 55. And through the advent, we have these awesome things on bikes called power meters, right? And so you can literally see exact performance real time. This athlete saw, and the reason she cited him was that he was just yeah, absolutely, show all of my data. So she showed all of this athlete's data. He saw increases in VO2 max, lactate threshold power, race results, everything for 14 years after he came to her. So he was 55, and until he was 69, he saw measurable gains every single year. She cited another study, and I've done some research on this guy. This Italian guy who started cycling at the age of 80, and at age 101, decided that he wanted to set the hour record in his age group. So for those of you who don't know what the hour record is, it's basically you sit on a velodrome, which is like a cycling track, like wooden boards, and he rides around this damn thing for an hour. He's 14 miles an hour at 101 years old. So this local exercise physiology lab is like, what the fuck? Look at this guy. So they say, hey, we want you to come in. We want to test you. We want to look at all this stuff, and then we want to train you for. I don't know if they said 2 years or if they just said until you're dead or whatever. But basically they trained him for 2 years, and I don't know the story. I don't know if they tried to do it for 3 and he finally kicked the bucket. But after 2 years of them training him, and keep in mind he'd been riding a bike for 20 years by this point and was 101, he saw something like a 14% gain in VO2 max and a 12% gain in max power. And he went from 14 miles in 1 hour to 17 miles in 1 hour, from age 101 to 103. So, I mean, it's, I tell this to people, and I can't tell people enough. If you get into a training plan and you focus on the right amounts of training and the right amounts of rest and varying your training, and especially the older you get, you have to have a lot of intensity in that. You have to do intervals, because that's the first thing, as you get older, the first thing you lose is strength and anaerobic capacity. So you lose the ability to go fast. And so if you want to make gains and or minimize declines, you have to train intensely. And if you can do that, you can absolutely see gains for at least 5, probably 10, and very, very possibly 15 years. And real gains. We're not talking well, I think I might be faster than last year, but shit you can measure. And that's awesome. One of the best ways to make sure that you are seeing those gains from year to year to year is to log your training. So every one of my athletes, they have to have a heart rate monitor and a GPS watch or some kind of thing. And I do have a couple who don't have heart rate monitors because they refuse. But every athlete has to provide me data from every workout. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to necessarily be numbers. I'm not a super analytical coach. But at the very least, they have to say, how did you feel? That's my first question all the time. They're like, oh, I went and did this run and I did it at this pace. I'm like, cool, how'd you feel? Did you feel great? Did you feel like shit? Did you not want to be out there? Did you feel like you could take over the world? Because those factors to me matter more than anything. And over time, if you record that data, and I'm a big fan in a perfect world, every single one of my athletes records how far they went, how long it took them, how much elevation gain there was, and what their heart rate was. And then they write down how was their mood, how was their energy, how well did they execute the workout, and how were their recovery choices in the 24 hours prior to that workout. And with that data, recorded year over year over year over year, you can do a hell of a job of repeating good training blocks and good races and avoiding repeating bad ones. Because you always have something that you can go back and I'm like, man, that one sucked. What the hell did I do before that? And you look back and you're like, oh, okay, well maybe it was, that bachelor party a week before my A race where I reenacted the movie The Hangover. Not a good thing to do, right? And a lot of coaches will work a lot with the objective data, the numbers, the heart rate data, the vertical kilometers, or the vertical feet gained and all that kind of stuff. But a really good coach, in my opinion, a really good coach will get to know you and will ask you those questions about like, how'd you feel? How was your mood? And some of that is like, for me, I don't want my athletes doing a workout where they are slogging. And maybe if you're trying to become a mediocre 100-mile runner, that's maybe learning to just feel like shit and push through it works. But for the most part, get back to that. Well, so I guess it really depends on, and I forgot to preface this whole talk with, I typically work with athletes on one of two things. One is increasing capacity. So can you do more? You've done a 50, you want to do 100. You've done, you've done a 10K, you want to do a marathon. You don't really care about the speed, you want to increase capacity. And then more commonly, you want to increase performance. Done a 10K, I want to do a 10K again, but I want to do it faster. So when you're increasing capacity, there are times when it's important to learn how to suffer and to really be, find yourself in a dark place and keep going. But for most of my athletes, it's all about performance. And so so you don't want to, you don't want workouts where you are slow, where you feel slow and you don't want to be out there. So if you think about, you start a training block and you go out and you do, say, and I would never do this, but say you're going to run 10 miles every day for 10 days. Completely unrealistic training block and a poor way to structure things. But you go out the first day and you feel really good from mile 1. You go out the second day and you feel really good from mile 1. You go out the third day and you're like, whew, this first mile, you're a little bit tired going into it. The first mile doesn't feel very good. Second mile, you start to feel pretty good. Third day, or the fourth day, you go out and you feel kind of tired for 2 miles, and then everything feels good. And then, that kind of keeps going. And then like the fourth or the fifth or sixth day, you get out there and you never feel good. That day is a wasted day. You should have stopped training the day before that. You should have figured, that's almost impossible to do. It's especially without a coach, without some kind of outside eye looking in on that. Because that day that you felt crap, you were probably also performing poorly. You probably weren't running very fast. Your technique probably wasn't very good. And it just wasn't a very effective workout. You would have been better off resting that day. And the reason that I ask for the mood scores for my athletes is typically I will see that mood score drop 2 or 3 days before that one workout where they felt like shit the whole time. Like I'll be able to guess basically when their energy is going to drop, by when their mood scores drop. Because you'll have a couple days when you're like, fuck, I don't want to get out here. I don't want to do this. And then you warm up and you're like, okay, actually I don't feel too bad. But that's a sign that you're about to start feeling too bad. And you want to avoid that. Yeah. So, what does this all have to do with schema? Mostly, as we've talked about, mostly we're talking about like how do you get fit over time, and how do you make sure that any gains that you make in schema this year, or in skinning, or in backcountry skiing, or whatever that is, how do you make sure that you don't lose those gains, right? Because where's the fun in that? You work hard for this shit. You don't want to make the gain and then lose it, and then make the gain and lose it, and over time just kind of do this, right? You want to do this. This is way more fun, to just keep getting faster and keep getting stronger and keep getting faster and keep getting stronger. So that's how that really has to do with schemo. In the short term, though, the ways that you can best prepare for this coming season, and so keep the fitness from the summer to go into the winter, and then the same principles will kind of apply to keep to going from the winter to the summer. We talk a lot about the engine. How many of you guys have heard of the term like, oh, that person has a good engine? Engine? Yep. So we talk a lot about the engine. What we don't talk enough about in endurance sports is the transmission, and that's the muscle. Okay? So you have the engine, which turns oxygen and fuel into power. And then you have the muscles, which turn that power into motion. So we really, especially if we're worried about performance, well, and really for increasing capacity also, we really want to think about, you can't run 100 miles on a shit transmission. Where was it going with that? It's a whiskey, remember? Engine is transferable between sports. Okay? If you can breathe hard running, you can breathe hard skinning. Now, whether or not you go anywhere with that breathing hard is all about transmission. So
it's like Frank Bowman. He can do this all day long as fast as he wants, but if you don't have technique going uphill.
Yeah.
The slow guy is just as quick.
Right, yeah. And if you don't have stride length, or if you don't have, like power on the bicycle, how many times have you passed somebody on the bike path who's doing 150 cadence, and they're going nowhere, and you're like, great engine, how about some fucking transmission? So what we do in order to, and it's kind of backwards to the kind of the old school of thinking, which is that anytime you start a new sport, you start with a relatively low volume of low intensity activity, and you build the volume of the low intensity activity before you ever do intensity. But that's kind of out the window now, because what that does is that continues to work on the engine, and we want to learn to be fast, and we want to learn to be effective, right? So what I do is this time of year, each one of my athletes will, as they're transitioning from, and we'll pick two very different sports. We'll say mountain biking and going into backcountry skiing or ski-mo racing. So the first thing I do is every 3 days, they do a hard ski-mo workout, and that'll be some form of hill repeats. My favorite this time of year is 30-30s. They pick a hill that's 5 minutes long. Do 30 seconds hard, 30 seconds easy, 30 seconds hard, 30 seconds easy, 30 seconds hard.
On the bike or on foot?
On foot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they do on foot, probably with poles, thinking about how it feels to be on skins. Okay? So you're thinking about swishing your hips around. You're thinking about trying not to take these big giant clumping steps, right? You're trying to think about how it feels to be with a backpack on, how it feels to be with poles, all that kind of stuff. Ski imitation. So you do that 30-30s for 5 minutes, you come back down, 30-30s for 5 minutes, come back down, 30-30s for 5 minutes, go home. And that workout is, because you take those 30-second breaks, isn't very aerobically challenging. but it is extremely muscularly challenging because you haven't done this shit in months, right? You haven't done that since, you know, April or May, or, I mean, hell, maybe maybe you skinned once a month over the summer or something like that. But by and large, your body's not ready for that. Okay, so you built some good engine, but the engine wasn't strong enough to build, or that you built some good transmission, but the transmission wasn't really strong enough to hold, to improve the engine. So the next day, you've been mountain biking shitload all summer. Next day, you go for a 3-hour mountain bike ride. Nice and slow, nice and mellow, keeping it easy. And then you probably take a day off. And then you repeat that for 2 weeks. You do super hard ski imitation workout. And maybe that's 30-30s, maybe that's 4 times 5 minutes all out. Come down, 5 minutes all out. What I really try to do is, one of the things to think about is, walking is, like hiking is a much closer motion to skinning than running is. So I always try to get my athletes to walk if they can. Every workout comes with an intensity prescription. And if they can hit that intensity prescription walking, do it. Awesome. Try to find a steep enough hill that you set yourself up for success. If you can't, some of the higher intensity workouts that are really designed to build a much higher effort and much higher like lactate result, they might have to run. But by and large, we really try to do a lot of hiking this time of year.
What heart rate zone would you be in?
So for typically, if you do, I do everything in a percentage of lactate threshold. So and so I use, you know, the lactate threshold is essentially your max for 20 minutes, which kind of correlates to your max for an hour. I typically do, usually I can keep most of my athletes hiking in zone 4, which is just a little bit below up to just a little bit above that lactate threshold. If we want to do zone 5, if we want to do VO2 stuff, they can almost never do that hiking. It's really hard to hit those zones hiking. They have to run at that point. And then sometimes, depending on the terrain too, if it's somebody who doesn't have a steep hill close to them, then there's no way that they can even hit zone 4 hiking. You know, so the grade affects it a lot. So typically, what we do is 2 weeks of one hard like skinning imitation workout every 3 days, and then we do 2 weeks of 3 times a week. So typically we'll do one hard workout every 3 days, and then the next week, or for 2 weeks, and then the next week we'll do short hard intervals, and then long hard intervals, and then maybe we start to work in a distance day on the new sport. And then we do the exact same thing the next week. And then after those 4 weeks, then we have a rest week. You know, then we let everything that you just beat the crap out of that was brand new and kind of uncomfortable for the last 4 weeks, then we take some rest. And then at that point, we're pretty much ready to go full on into whatever volume and mode we want to. Cool? Let's see, other schemo things. So yeah, walking is the most important. Most of my athletes will measure volume in vertical, not in miles, not in time. Well, I do time a little bit for sure, but vertical is probably the most important, and I find correlates the most to the workload of the event. Let's see, other schemo stuff.
You said they take polls. They put their pack on.
What's that?
Do they do those workouts with their pack on, like what they might carry for schemo, or not?
Well, so it kind of depends. A schemo pack weighs maybe 2 or 3 pounds. So a true schemo racer, I usually don't. They'll get plenty of that, you know, once the season's rolling. But for some of my like mountaineering athletes or my hardcore backcountry skiers, absolutely. I'll do weight vests or packs. Yep. What's that?
Even in those first 2 months,
Mhm.
or okay.
Yep. Probably not in those first 2 weeks. I'll usually let them, that's hard enough for those weeks. But that like third and fourth week where you're starting to put it in like 3 days a week, yeah, I would put some packs in then. And then, and then once you get into the season, all those same kind of rules apply, right? Like you still want to be taking a day off. You want to be making sure that that you are. Oh, and then one of the other general rules that I inevitably talk to most of my new athletes about is when you're doing an interval session, the time between the intervals is not a workout. You should not be trying to maintain some kind of pace or heart rate in between intervals. You should be trying to rest as much as possible. I mean, I remember track workouts in high school where I'd be finish a workout and for 3 minutes, I'd oh God, that was all I could do. Oh God, there was no jogging, there was no trying to maintain pace, there was literally trying not to fall down and not just stand there for 3 minutes in between intervals. From Tom, is it true or a myth that cross training helps avoid injury? That is a good question. It depends on the sport, kind of. Like for running, cross training absolutely affects your ability to, or affects your likelihood of being injured. And for the most part, that's just because of the pounding. But for something like skinning, I don't typically worry too much about cross training because as a rule, it's fairly low impact. But I do like it. I mean, most of my athletes do at least 2 sports, so at some point you're doing some other sport, and I think it's good. So I think, we'll just open it up to questions. Thanks for the question, Tom. Any other questions? Bill?
You talked about rest, and finally comfortable with it, have no problem taking the day off. But also in my scheduling, you have a recovery day, which is heart rate 1, and you haven't touched on that, but that's like a struggle.
Yeah.
Just go out and and spin lightly or walk for endurance athletes. I hate those days.
So what those days do is you've already put in, for you, we've already done a super hard day on Tuesday, right? Doing another really hard day is, so again, we talk about wanting those workouts to be quality. And, and we talked about you don't want to get to the point where you feel like crap the whole workout because that's not a quality workout. You're not moving quickly anymore. So if you do a really hard day, the next day trying to get in a quality workout isn't useful. But for most of us, once we have a certain level of fitness, an easy day is actually makes you recover faster than a day off. We still have to have those days, a day off every week. But for you, certainly with the volume that you're putting in, an easy day, what that does is, so we don't want to cross the threshold of it being a workout. But we want to stimulate the metabolism up. We want to get the metabolism up. Because increasing your metabolism is like a time machine for your body. If you can get that metabolism to crank up, everything moves faster. It doesn't move at the same rate. So when you're flat on your ass, your metabolism moves slowly. So it takes X amount of time to recover. When you're moving and you're under that threshold of it actually being a stressor or a workout, that time of recovering actually becomes a little less. And it definitely happens better and better. You recover better when you're doing that. That's the biggest one.
So how do I blend doing some of that with the weather in my life? Because for instance, I'm a skier. I'm a power skier.
Yep.
If it snows for 10 days straight, I'm going to ski my days straight.
Yep.
And if I could barely move, and then you throw in work and
Uh-huh.
life and things like that, it's not, you know.
Yep, absolutely. So what we're trying to do is manage, most of my job is managing the ebbs and flows of training and recovery. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our body tired in a specific way. And then we're trying to recover so that the next time we do something that specific way, we're not as tired. Right? Makes sense. So all I would do with something like that is I would say, cool, let's go, as you see that storm coming, take a couple days off before, hammer yourself, take a couple days off after. And even though, you're going to have a couple days where you aren't going to be at your peak performance, that doesn't matter, because that's what you're training for. That's the other thing is, I'm never, if an athlete's doing think of it as a stage race, that's your fucking Tour de France. Those athletes aren't going to get out there on that 10th day and go, I'm tired, I quit. They're going to keep going, and because that's the race, that's the whole point. So I would just
balance of motivation and fun versus training.
Right. Yeah. And so I would just say during the depths of that, as you see that workout coming, take a couple days off to make sure that you're not tired going into it, and then make good recovery choices during, and then take your time off afterwards. I did the same thing last year in January. I skied 18 days straight or something like that. My quads did not like me after that, but I wasn't gonna take time off. And that's one of the things that I am all about with my athletes. I have athletes come to me all the time from other coaches because they're like, my coach told me not to ski, or my coach was too rigid with my training and wouldn't let me do POW days. I'm like, get the fuck out there. This is not something that you miss. Go have your powder days and adjust the schedule accordingly. Again, all we're trying to do is this. The biggest mistake that I see, one of the biggest mistakes I'll see athletes do in that case, is they do that 10 days and they had a big training day scheduled on the 11th day, and they go do that 11th day. What the fuck? You just trained a ton. You don't need to train specifically here. You just did a ton. Take some time off. Take 3 or 4 days off until you feel awesome again, and then roll.
What about, do you have any athletes that are on the slightly other end of the spectrum? I understand people that work with you are fairly motivated, but I want big things, but I don't have the energy that I want to always train for the things that I want. Do you have any tips and tricks to get people out there consistently? Because I kind of find myself playing mind games, oh, you only have to go out for a half hour, which may not be a good training session, but sometimes that's all I can do to get myself out there. Do you have something that keeps people going when they're slightly below what you think is an ideal training schedule?
Are you time limited or energy limited or?
A little bit of both. I mean, I'm kind of working on the energy thing right now, but that's going to be a long, slow process.
Totally. So often what I will do with a lot of athletes is create something that I call the 10-minute rule. And I say, no matter what, if there's something on the schedule, go out for 10 minutes. And if you still feel like shit, go home. Don't worry about it. And don't even worry about don't even think about warming up. Just fucking go jog for 10 minutes. Go skin super easy. I did that for almost a month this spring because I cooked myself over the winter. But you go out for 10 minutes, and if you still feel like crap, you go home because you weren't meant to train that day. That was not a good day to train. And what you'll find is that probably 8 out of 10 days where you don't feel like training before, you get out there and you're like, oh, okay, I feel good. I'm going to do the workout as I had planned. Because there's no correlation whatsoever between how you feel before your workout and how you feel once you warm up. And if you give yourself the permission to go by feel, and you go out for 10 minutes, and you give yourself honest, no judgment permission to turn around after 10 if you feel like it, 7 times out of 10 you're gonna go out. and you're going to get that workout in. And the other times you shouldn't have, and so you make the right choice by turning around. And every athlete's a little different. Some athletes don't know until it's like 20 or 30 minutes. You know, they might be like, it just takes me forever to warm up. So go out and do that. And if you don't warm up, then you're done. You know, you're good. Yes. Yes.
So I'm training for both skidding and cross-country skiing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if I'm doing workouts now on hills, if it matters what length of pole I use.
Not too much. I would probably just use your classic poles. Skimo poles are going to be 5 to 7 centimeters shorter, but so actually, here's what I'd probably do. I would do bounding and hill running workouts with your classic poles, and I would do any ski walking with your skimo poles. I would probably do it like that, and then I would alternate. Of your 2 hard workouts in a week, I would do 1 skimo prep and 1 Nordic prep, and then I would swap your long workouts on the weekends. One is more skimo style, and then the next is more classic style. You skating too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Roller skis?
I don't have
Oh, okay.
any. Yeah.
Do they have brakes?
No.
Yeah, that's why.
I mean, some do.
So many hills.
Some do, but the ones that are any good don't. Yeah. I actually put a pair of tech bindings on a pair of roller skis. And I go up Boonstone.
Oh my God.
It's awesome. It's so much fun. People see me. This is one of my absolute favorite fucking stories ever. I went first day on these roller skis. I just bought these old shitty classic roller skis, so they will move. There's a ratchet on the back wheel, so they move forward and then they'll stop, and then they'll move forward and they'll stop, so that you can, just like skins, right? So you can go up. So I put the skins, or I put the roller skis on. I put my skimo boots on. I put my helmet on. It's like, this time of year. Breckenridge is fairly quiet. I go skin up Moonstone. I come down Boreas Pass Road. And I'm coming back down French Street. And this guy, this like flat brim, like 20-year-old, like takes the time to walk out into the middle of the street as I pass and go, Jerry doesn't have an off season, huh? I just lost it. I was like, oh, that's fantastic.
Were you like, do you know who I think I am?
Yeah, right? Oh, it was good.
I got another.
Yeah, keep them coming. No.
Well, you're talking about the transmission. Just by feel, like after mountain biking all summer, I definitely don't feel like my muscles are ready to skimo.
Uh-huh.
But after skimoing for a winter, does that kind of translate a little bit better back into biking? Just stuff like your back, because we want to be kind of ready to go for some things in June.
Yep.
How much more stuff, by specific stuff, do I need to try and get in, like in addition to skimo, to be good to go by June?
So I do the exact same transition back. Once every 3 days, super hard. 3 days for 2 weeks, and then you're good to go.
But do you go down to Denver for something like that? Because we can't bike much of anything here in May.
Yeah, I mean, I would go down to Denver. There's 2 cycle labs in the county now that you can totally do. I mean, I'm a big fan of Breck Bike Guides, but you also have, over here in Dillon, you have the Endurance Cycle Lab. Yeah.
And they're still in business? I didn't know.
We were by the other day.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard he's running for sheriff again. We'll see how much that takes.
I think there's a couple people involved in it, though. They seem.
Yeah.
We stopped by on Lee's ride, and they seem good to go.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about them even slowing down. I think they're still growing.
And then a crazy suggestion is in May, riding Kremlin.
In
It's not that
Kremlin?
far.
No,
It's
that's
that
not
far
crazy at all.
And do their stuff on
Yeah.
the cliffs. So there's a whole
So
bunch
they
of
have
trails.
dirt open?
Oh
on
yeah,
Kremlin
in
there?
May, absolutely, April,
Yep.
May.
Totally.
It's all open in Kremlin. Yeah, so right by Wolford Reservoir.
Okay.
So that's all public lands, and there's a huge trail system. Just
Really?
it's kind of like Tubbs.
big intensity, short, how's that work out to get big saddle
You don't need to.
Yes, you do. You
Yeah.
do 200 miles, you do.
You do that once every 2 weeks. You get in one big ride every 2 weeks. But if you've been putting in, 20K vert weeks, 30K vert weeks on skins,
I'm more worried about just sitting on the damn saddle.
yeah.
for many hours.
Yep. So I would,
Especially like those that stuff in training, you'd get in hours there on the saddle.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, once every 2 weeks is all you need for those big days. And then a whole lot of chamois butter. D's nuts.
D's nuts. Lower back exercises.
So I have an assistant coach who swears by, and a couple athletes who swear by these videos called the foundation or foundations or something like that. It's a really, really good set of videos, and I think there's even a book, and I think most of it's free on YouTube, exercises that work for the low back. I am a big fan of gym strength work, no matter what. And if you don't like gyms at all, I think you can get a whole lot done with a band about this big, like a little glute med band. A bigger band, something that's like 6 feet or something like that. That's kind of like medium strength, and then like a kettlebell, like a good heavy kettlebell. I think you can get a lot done with that stuff. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if you're figuring a big race day is somewhere between 16 and 18 hours, then what's your long workout time frame? What should that look like?
I usually go 80%.
80%.
Uh-huh. If it's longer than that I'd say longer than that 12 to 14 hours, then I typically try to do, so for like somebody who's trying to run 100 miles, they're not going to do they're not going to do an 80-mile training run. But I'd probably do 40 on Saturday and 40 on Sunday. So if you're going to do a 12-hour race, I'd probably try to do a 9-hour training ride at some point. But I would do that 3 weeks before, and then 3 weeks before that, I would do a 7-hour ride. So you don't need to be stacking up those big days in there. The fitness that you get from the shorter, harder workouts will translate into longer stuff.
What do you do for those 3 weeks between your last hard workout and that race day, that 17-hour race day?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you do with yourself? Is it complete rest, or are you still like working out and then just tapering the last week before?
So if I have a race here at the end of the week, I rest this week, and then so here's that last big workout. It's more like here's that last big workout. This week is still a really big, hard week. It just doesn't have that 80% of that huge effort in there. But this is probably your hardest overall volume week. And then you do a rest week, and then you do the race week.
So your rest week is complete rest?
Again, it's the exact same rest week as those other weeks.
Okay.
Day off, day
gotcha.
easy, day off, day easy. Some kind of short intervals, a fairly easy day, and then a big day back to training. Because race performance is a combination of and capacity, any kind of thing where you want to be at your best is you want the intersection of fitness and freshness. Fitness you get from training, freshness you get from not training. As you train, your fitness goes up, your fitness goes up, your fitness goes up, but your freshness might leave you there, but it's probably going to drop a little bit. So then you need to rest to make sure that this happens. So as you rest, your fitness goes down a little bit, right? But your performance goes way, 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 way up because it's where these two meet. So what happens is if you take that week before, like leading up to the race off, if that's how you get your rest, then you end up here. So again, you're kind of back down here. So what you want to do is you train a ton and get not fit, and then you kind of do this, and then most athletes do much better when you hit it here as opposed to when you hit it here. So it's called like decreasing form versus increasing form. most athletes do best on decreasing form. Like a few days into your training block is when you're going to feel best. So that's when you race. I don't think I see any other questions. I wonder if I missed some. I don't know.
When's the first big racing race?
I don't know. I haven't seen a schedule yet. I mean, I would guess that it's going to be somewhere around November 15th-ish.
No, it's in December.
December?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so sorry if I sound redundant, but how do you incorporate the gym days with your endurance days?
Excellent question. The guiding principle, so remember we're trying to do this, right? So you want to keep the hard days hard, and you want to keep the easy days easy. All of my athletes do their hardest strength workouts on the same day as they do their hardest interval workouts. But after. So sometime, usually after. Whatever you do first, you're the freshest for, and you get the most results out of. If you are strength limited or injured, or it's the off season and you know strength is historically a weakness, then you might do the strength workout first in the morning, and then in the afternoon, you're going to be a little fatigued for your interval workout.
Oh, so it's not even in the same workout. You're looking at people that are working out twice a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the best way to do it.
Interesting.
I mean, you can certainly stack them together. I have plenty of athletes who do. It's just the more fresh you are for the workout, the more you get out of it.
Right.
So if you stack workouts onto each other like that, you just get less out of the strength. But if it's not a limiter, then it's fine.
Right. Time would be a limit then, like to do 2 a day.
Mm-hmm. And that's where that home gym, that you can do something for like 20 minutes right after you get back from work. You can get so much out of 20 or 30 minutes with a 40-pound kettlebell. Yes?
Why do you say doing strength after?
Because, and actually this is a great question. For a Nordic skier, often I would have them do the strength first. Because it's simply because you get the most out of the workout that you're freshest for. So if you do the strength first thing in the morning, then you're going to be a little tired for that interval workout, and you're going to get a little less out of that. So for most of us, we're looking at building fitness more than we're looking at building strength. So we'll do the intervals first, and then not get quite as much out of the strength workout. But for a Nordic skier, I would certainly, if you need some badass double pole power, doing a lot of pull-ups and dips first thing in the morning, big weights. Get done. Cool. Well, if there's no more questions, thank you for coming, everyone. Visit my website and my Facebook page and my Instagram and all that fun stuff.
My YouTube channel.
And my YouTube channel. YouTube! And have a good night. And I'll be around for any questions if anybody wants to ask anything in person. So, cheers. Thanks.